The winter wind howling off the San Francisco Bay in 1872 carried with it the scent of desperate, unbridled ambition. Into the opulent, mahogany-lined offices of the Bank of California walked two men who looked entirely out of place among the velvet and brass. They were weathered, wearing the dust of the frontier deep in the creases of their faces, their hands calloused from years of fruitless labor in the dirt. They did not ask for a loan, nor did they seek an audience with the bank's formidable president. Instead, they approached a teller with a heavy, unremarkable buckskin sack, asking only for a secure place to store their property. When pressed about the contents, the men feigned a panicked reluctance, a calculated hesitation that acted as the perfect bait for the predators of the financial district. Slowly, the leather drawstrings were loosened and the contents spilled onto the polished wood. Raw, uncut diamonds, rubies, emeralds, sapphires, a chaotic, glittering pile of unimaginable wealth sitting incongruously under the gaslight. The men claimed they had stumbled upon a field in the remote American West where precious stones could be kicked up from the very dust. The sight of those raw stones bypassed every rational safeguard in the minds of the observing financiers. This was the Gilded Age, an era where fortunes were violently ripped from the earth, and the men who controlled the capital were perpetually terrified of missing the next great strike. The bankers did not see two uneducated prospectors. They saw a mirror reflecting their own insatiable greed. The sheer absurdity of the claim was eclipsed by the terrifying possibility that it might actually be true. The architects of this glittering illusion were Philip Arnold and John Slack. They were cousins, veterans of the California gold rush, who had spent decades chasing phantom veins of ore, learning exactly how desperate men behaved when confronted with the promise of sudden wealth. But Arnold and Slack were not merely unlucky miners, they were astute observers of human nature. They understood that a wealthy investor would never trust a poor man's word, but that same investor would implicitly trust his own greed. Their masterstroke required capital, patience, and a transcontinental deception. Months before setting foot in that San Francisco bank, Arnold had traveled to London and Amsterdam, the diamond capitals of the world. Using a modest sum acquired from previous smaller grifts, he purchased thousands of dollars worth of low-quality, uncut industrial gems. He bought diamond bort, flawed rubies, and cheap sapphires, stones that held little value to a jeweler but possessed the raw, rugged aesthetic necessary to sell a lie. The true genius of their operation lay in the geographical staging. Arnold and Slack transported their European acquisitions back across the Atlantic and deep into the unforgiving landscape of the Wyoming Territory. They chose a desolate, sun-baked mesa, a place so remote and hostile that mere survival demanded total focus. Here, they meticulously salted the earth. They pressed diamonds into the soil, wedged rubies into the crevices of anthills, and scattered sapphires across the bedrock, transforming a barren plateau into a theatrical set of impossible prosperity. Back in San Francisco, the bait had been swallowed whole. A syndicate of immensely powerful men, including former Union generals and railroad tycoons, demanded a share of the phantom claim. Arnold and Slack played the reluctant discoverers perfectly, agreeing to sell a portion of their rights only if the site could be verified by an expert. But they insisted on a blindfolded journey, ensuring the exact coordinates remained a mystery, adding a layer of conspiratorial secrecy that only heightened the investors' fever. The syndicate hired Henry Janin, the most respected mining engineer in America at the time, to authenticate the field. Janin was a man whose reputation was built on cold, hard geology, a professional skeptic whose word could make or break a mining venture. The syndicate believed Janin's expertise would protect their capital. They failed to realize that the trap had been designed specifically to short-circuit the intellect of an expert. Upon arriving at the salted mesa after days of disorienting travel, Janin was unleashed upon the manufactured wonderland. Within minutes of digging, his shovel struck a sapphire, then a ruby, then a diamond. The concentration of gems was staggering. Janin, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the planted stones, abandoned his usual rigorous sampling methods. The euphoria of the moment eroded his scientific detachment, leading him to declare the field a genuine, world-altering discovery. The validation from Janin ignited a firestorm of speculative madness. To solidify their impending empire, the syndicate required the ultimate endorsement. A sample of the stones was transported to New York City, straight to the velvet-draped sanctum of Tiffany & Co. There, the legendary jeweler Charles Louis Tiffany, a man whose eye for perfection was unmatched, examined the frontier haul. The great jeweler fell victim to the same psychological snare that had captured the bankers and the engineer. Presented with a narrative of a massive American diamond field, endorsed by titans of industry and a renowned geologist, Tiffany examined the stones through a lens of extreme confirmation bias. He appraised the raw, low-grade gems at a staggering $150,000, a massive overvaluation that effectively sealed the trap. The illusion was now certified by the highest authority in the land. The psychology underpinning the Great Diamond Hoax is a masterclass in collective delusion. The victims were not naive fools. They were apex predators of the financial world. Yet their very success made them vulnerable. They believed their wealth and status inoculated them against deception. Arnold and Slack weaponized this arrogance by creating a lie so massive, so heavily endorsed by the victim's own peers. The miners ensured that questioning the hoax meant questioning the collective intelligence of the American elite. With Tiffany's appraisal and Janin's report, the syndicate incorporated the New York and San Francisco Mining and Commercial Company. Capitalization was set at $10 million. The wealthiest men in the country fought viciously for the privilege of buying shares. Arnold and Slack, playing their roles to the final curtain, humbly accepted a payout of roughly $600,000 for their remaining interest in the claim. They took the money and quietly vanished into the American interior. The year 1872 was a crucible of American expansionism. The Transcontinental Railroad had connected the coasts, and the vast, uncharted interior of the continent was viewed as a limitless vault of natural resources. The public was primed to believe in miracles pulled from the dirt. The diamond field was not just a financial venture, it was a validation of the nation's manifest destiny, a glittering proof that America was inherently blessed with infinite wealth. But the illusion possessed a fatal flaw, one that could not be hidden from a truly objective mind. Enter Clarence King, an ambitious, brilliant geologist leading a government survey of the 40th parallel. While the financial world was blinded by the glare of the gems, King was staring at the cold, hard data. The very concept of the field offended his geological sensibilities. King knew that diamonds, rubies, and sapphires require vastly different geological conditions and immense, varying pressures to form. Finding them all coexisting in the same shallow dirt layer was scientifically akin to finding a polar bear and a camel sharing the same den. Driven by professional curiosity and a deep suspicion of the syndicate's secretive methods, King utilized clues from Janin's published report to triangulate the exact location of the forbidden mesa. In the freezing winds of late autumn, King and his team arrived at the desolate Wyoming plateau. At first glance, the ground sparkled exactly as promised. The team quickly collected dozens of precious stones. For a brief, terrifying moment, King wondered if the impossible was true, if the fundamental laws of geology had somehow been rewritten on this barren rock. Then, the meticulous nature of true investigation took over. King noticed that the gems were entirely localized to areas where the topsoil had been disturbed. He dug deeper into the undisturbed earth and found absolutely nothing. He observed that many of the stones were resting atop anthills, placed with a precision that defied natural erosion. The earth was not yielding wealth, it was merely holding it on display. The definitive crushing blow to the grand illusion came when one of King's men picked up a diamond and noticed something unnatural. Upon close inspection, the stone bore the unmistakable, microscopic marks of a lapidary's wheel. It was a partially cut gem. Nature does not polish its own diamonds. The earth does not facet its own rubies. The grand American diamond field was nothing more than a meticulously crafted stage set, a graveyard of cheap European cast-offs. King rushed back to civilization and exposed the fraud, shattering the $10 million company overnight. The panic that followed was absolute. The titans of industry, the brilliant engineers, and the legendary jewelers were exposed not just as victims, but as willing participants in their own deception. The humiliation was profound, a public unmasking of the greed that drove the era's financial machinery. The shadow of that desolate mesa stretched long over the lives of those involved. Philip Arnold retreated to Kentucky, using his ill-gotten wealth to buy a bank and live out his days in relative comfort, having successfully outmaneuvered the most powerful men in the country. John Slack disappeared entirely, a phantom who had helped orchestrate the perfect crime and then dissolved into the ether, leaving behind only the wreckage of shattered egos. The echoes of their false promise followed the victims to their graves. The Great Diamond Hoax remains a stark monument to a timeless vulnerability. It proved that the intellect is easily bypassed when the heart is captivated by the promise of unearned riches. The perpetrators did not need to forge documents or hack impenetrable vaults. They simply needed to provide a canvas upon which wealthy men could paint their most desperate desires. Ultimately, the deception of 1872 stands as a masterwork of psychological manipulation. It stripped away the veneer of sophistication from the Gilded Age elite, revealing the primal, gullible core that lies beneath the pursuit of endless wealth. The true artistry of the fraud was not in the planting of the stones, but in the harvesting of human greed, a harvest that yielded one of history's most spectacular and enduring illusions.